why you're the worst superintendent in America.
The worst state education official is the biggest compliment I could get. My friends came to me and said, Tom, you're crazy. First of all, you're taking a big cut in income. And secondly, you were Attorney General, you're going backwards. And I said, no, the big problem is in the schools, and I absolutely have to work on that.
You know, there was something very controversial, school safety and security.
That's why I ran, because of the lowering of standards, even though my friends told me I was crazy.
Superintendent Tom Horne, it's so great to be with you here at the great state of Arizona.
It's great to be with you. I've been a long admirer of Dennis.
So this morning we just announced our partnership with the education here. I'd like to talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing here in Arizona and some of the things that we're doing here together with PragerU. But I could not resist picking up some of the hit pieces on you. I mean, it's just amazing to me how the left-wing press loves to hate on you. And I can actually relate to that. And I can't resist making fun of them. So I want to just dive into this particular one, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, happy to. And taking them on gives me the same adrenaline high that my friend gets from skydiving.
So good. I'm glad you don't mind it, because I don't want to offend you or anything. This one, I guess this is associated with Joy Reid, which she's not a fan of ours either. So
she's outrageous.
Okay, so prepare yourself for this one. Get to know Tom Horne, America's worst state education official.
Being called the worst state education official by Joy Reid is the biggest compliment I could get.
Right, totally. Okay, so why are you so bad? When it comes to Arizona's public school system, which has routinely ranked among the nation's worst, Horne seems intent on destroying it. You woke up one day, decided to run for office, become the superintendent of the state of Arizona, and then you decided to ruin it. And I'll continue. A 2021 study found Arizona to have more charter schools than nearly every other state in the country. How dare you, Superintendent Horne?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say about the charter schools. I was in the legislature in the 1990s when charter schools were first coming into their own. And the Senate, even though it had a Republican majority, passed a bill to limit their growth. The House, and they put that in their education omnibus bill. The House passed an education omnibus bill without that. And I was chairman of the conference committee to reconcile those two. And the first thing I did was to kill that Senate bill. I thought the market should prevail. People should have as many charter schools as they want. And they do. It's not like New York, where a lot of people have seen the video where they have a lottery and 1 out of 100 get to go to a charter school, and the others are crying and they're cheering. Here, anybody who wants to go to charter school can. And when I left office the first time, I was superintendent from 2003 to 2011. Then I was attorney general. Then I went back to private practice, and I came back to superintendent. When I left office the first time, Arizona was first in the country in charter schools. 10% of our kids were in charter schools. The number 2 state was Florida with 7%. And people around here like that because Florida likes to brag that they're first in everything.
I wonder what did your friends say when you decided to go from attorney general to superintendent of education? Did it feel like a shift, a demotion?
My friends came to me and said, Tom, you're crazy. First of all, you're taking a big cut in income from being a lawyer. I was a lawyer in private practice at the time. And secondly, you were attorney general, you're going backwards. And I said, no, the big problem is in the schools, and I absolutely have to work on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I think it's so absurd that they say that your intention is to destroy it.
Yeah, not to destroy it, but to get the focus back on academics. My predecessor was a Democrat, and she focused on everything other than academics. And so I want to get the focus back on academics, have the kids learning academics bell to bell, get rid of the distractions, and get the test scores up, get the academic proficiency up, which is so important to the future of the kids and the future of our state and the future of our country.
Yeah. They are so upset with the fact that you bring choice, right? I mean, we just came out of this, press conference. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're so upset is because we're saying that we're bringing them an optional resource. One of the questions that we've been confronted with was, how dare we not have bureaucrats review all the content? Mm-hmm. And to which my answer is, well, how about we have parents review the content, right? It's it all has to be through.
That was a great answer, yeah. The mission statement that we adopted when I was elected is that the Department of Education is a service organization dedicated to raise academic outcomes and to empower parents. And so that's one of my main values, is to empower parents. Nobody knows the kids as well as the parents do. When the child is born, it's the biggest thing in the parents' lives. No one else has that connection with the children.
Who are you seeing here on the ground in Arizona giving you grief over giving choice?
Well, I get attacked by the left, but that's food for me. I love getting attacked by them. I give as good as I get.
I guess it means you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So here, I'm going to continue this attack piece, and we'll go into some of the great things that you've done. The Arizona Republic reported recently that the state has the most expansive voucher program in the country to aid students in paying for charter and private school costs. This is why you're the worst superintendent in America.
Well, we not only have the most extensive, we're the first to have universal vouchers. And so, as the former Attorney General, I've been very determined that everything we do is proper, that we check every single request for funding, contrary to some advice I've gotten from people. And National Review had an article saying you should just spot check and not check everything. No, I check everything because we are the first. And if things don't go well here, it won't be good for the country. We have to do everything right here, be sure every expenditure is a valid education expenditure in conformity with the law, so that we can be an example so that it'll spread around the country.
Just before we sat down, I asked a question which I think people who are listening would find very interesting. When you were elected, were you able to hire your own staff, or were you in a situation where you're coming into a leadership position with bureaucrats or sabotaging you? Were you able to actually hire people who share your values and your vision for what needs to be done educationally?
Yes, Arizona has no tenure laws for state employees. So I chose my own executive team, which is 16 people. Below that, we kept people who were there, and then we made changes over time. But initially, it was just the 16 people at the top. It's the best team, not only that I've ever had, but that I've ever seen. And it's a tremendous pleasure for me to come to work every day, to work with these people. Every one of the 16 is a real superstar.
Amazing. For those who are listening and are very frustrated with what's happening in America right now educationally, and I know there are a lot of frustrations here in Arizona, it's nice to have just a beacon of light here, right? And just seeing so much optimism. Some of the things that you've worked on that has really become a national conversation are things that have to do with ESAs. Can you explain what are ESAs and why do you think they're important?
The ESA stands for Educational Scholarship Accounts, and they're universal. It's a fancy name for universal vouchers. And the idea is that we have excellent public schools in many cases, but not every school meets the needs of every student. And in fact, we have families where there are 3 kids, 2 are doing just fine in public school, but one has needs that are not being met. And so the parents can choose an alternate school to meet the needs of that child. This is a choice that rich people have always had, and we think people at all economic levels should have it.
I love it. There was something very controversial that I brought up a few times, and that has to do with school safety and security. And you've been an advocate for armed guards.
Yes.
Some of the hit pieces on you are basically saying that you're the bad guys because you're advocating for armed guards in front of schools. Right. Can you explain that?
Yes, these are actually police officers. We call them school resource officers. And they're there to protect the kids and protect the staff. And they also teach law. They get to know the kids. The kids get a much better attitude toward police for the rest of their life. They view them as friends that they can trust rather than as the enemy. And the biggest nightmare I've had, and this is why I pushed hard for all the schools to get school resource officers, which we fund through a legislative appropriation, is because my biggest nightmare is that some maniac will go into a school and kill 20 kids, as has happened in other states. So it could happen here. If that happens, their parents will never recover from losing their child. And if they find out that the school could have had a police officer to protect them and they didn't do it, you can imagine how they would feel about that decision making. So I've been pushing very hard for the school to spread this out. We doubled the number this past year. We have about 355 schools now with school resource officers. And I pushed them hard to get police officers in there because I don't want any kids exposed. So my opponents from the left say, we want gun-free schools. Well, when you say that, what you're really advertising is, you're a victim. Come get me. There's no one here to protect us. And that's not the right. Our number one duty is to protect the safety of our kids.
How are they getting away with something that makes no sense? How are your adversaries actually saying these things, that a school should not have any sort of security?
Well,
Why isn't what you're doing here a model for the entire United States of
no,
America?
the left says a lot of things that don't make sense.
Boy, I hope this is a big wake-up call.
Yeah.
You know, the other wake-up call that I think has waking parents up is this issue of girls having to compete against boys in sports. Combined with the whole Title IX thing. And I know you've been a fighter on this issue as well, and you've absorbed a lot of arrows, as we have here at PragerU, defending women. And so, first of all, I want to say thank you for defending our little girls. And secondly, what kind of work have you been doing here for that?
Well, Arizona passed a law prohibiting biological boys to compete against girls. And two big law firms in New York that are left-wing law firms found some plaintiffs here in Arizona to challenge the constitutionality of the law. They named 4 defendants. The other 3 defendants all conceded. They said, we agree with the plaintiff, including the Athletic Association, which is pretty crazy, and a couple of schools. I was the only defendant who fought it. And we got a liberal Tucson judge, so we'll have to appeal. And I'll take it to the United States Supreme Court if I have to, because we are not going to have girls having to compete against biological boys in their sports. It destroys their dreams. They work hard. Some of them work really hard on their sports. They dream of making the varsity team or maybe a scholarship or maybe the Olympics. And all of a sudden they have to compete against males, biological males who put on a dress and say they're women, like the crazy swimmer.
Yeah,
and,
Leah Thomas.
Yeah, Leah Thomas. And their dreams are shattered. They're devastated. And these left-wing people, I wonder where is their sympathy for these girls and women rather than wanting somebody to be able to put on a dress and compete against them.
Well, thanks for doing what you're doing. It is so important. I think it's one of those issues that has really been waking parents up because, many parents do have kids in sports and they're starting to realize that it just doesn't make sense. Something just makes no sense.
It's completely crazy to have biological boys competing against the girls.
I know that you've been attacked for fighting against the ethnic studies curriculum. I've actually personally pored over the ethnic studies curriculum in many states. Much of it is laced with anti-Semitism, anti-Israel propaganda. And I'm curious, what are things that you've seen here in Arizona, and how have you been able to fight back against it? Have you been able to fight back against it?
Okay, well, I started fighting ethnic studies, and part of ethnic studies in the Tucson Unified School District, included critical race theory back around 2005. And I read all their materials. And this is the definition of critical race theory that they taught the kids. Unlike traditional civil rights, which embraces incrementalism and step-by-step progress, critical race theory questions the very foundation of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of law. Can you imagine they're against equality theory, neutral principles of constitutional law, and they're against Enlightenment rationalism, which was enabled people to think for themselves rather than have to accept authority. It's pretty crazy. And so I fought it very hard in 2005. I got a law passed. I won a case, and it was taken out. But then when I left office, things went back to where they were, and we've got it back. And so I'm continuing to fight it because it's pretty crazy. I believe that we are all individuals, that we should be judged by what we know, what we can do, what is our character, what is our ability to appreciate beauty, and not what race we were born into. That's completely irrelevant. Whereas these ethnic studies courses teach that race is primary. And so instead of rewarding merit, we should just provide for equal outcomes by race, which if that spreads too far around the country, we'll become a third world country because it doesn't encourage effort, creativity, diligence. It's just if I belong to the right race, so I should get the result. We have to go back to rewarding individual merit, and it's a big pleasure for me to be the one fighting for that.
Yeah, it's also incredibly divisive, right? It's the opposite of e pluribus unum.
Right.
This whole idea that you look at somebody through the color of their skin rather than
Right.
who they are as a person.
Yeah.
You talk about critical race theory.
Yes.
One of the things that comes to my mind is that we have been advocating against CRT, DEI in schools. And we have been receiving so much hate because the claim is that we're making it up. I use this term gaslight. We're being gaslit on this subject. We've had an NBC reporter interview Dennis, basically telling Dennis that no teacher is teaching critical race theory, that it's absolutely made up. I'm actually holding here another article, which it's funny and sad at the same time. Tom Horne wants to stop Arizona's woke teachers, but first he has to find one.
Well,
as if they don't exist.
I was telling you about Tucson Unified School District, and that I was fighting them in 2005, and I thought for many years, I thought I was shouting in the wilderness. And then when Fox News referred to critical race theory as CRT, I knew my time had come. Other people had woken up to it. Yeah. We have to fight that with everything we've got.
We have to fight it, and we have to understand that it's actually real. We have to define it, we have to label it, and we have to let people know that it's actually real.
We have a school
seen
district.
Examples of how real it is? Can you share some?
Yeah, well, I mentioned Tucson. We have a school district called the Balch School District that adopted as their history textbook the 1619 Project, which is fiction from A to Z. They just make things up. They tell people that the war for independence was not because of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's in our Declaration of Independence, that it was done to protect white slave owners in the South from British interference in slavery. A whole bunch of professors who specialize in that area wrote into the New York Times that sponsored this book and said, there's not one shred of evidence from the time, not one piece of paper that supports that theory, but they just make things up.
Yeah, I mean, that America's founding was not, July 4th, 1776, but the
1619.
1619, right? So you also created an empowerment hotline,
yes,
which is very interesting because I think about it both as a parent, but even as an educator. People are afraid. They're afraid of the unions because they're a beast. I know I've personally felt the attacks, and like you and I have gotten used to it, but not every parent is built for that, especially if you have kids in schools, right? Like there's real retaliation against children whose parents are getting involved. And so what's your vision behind the empowerment hotline, and what are things that people are calling in on?
Well, let me tell you, the silver lining of COVID was that kids were taught at home and parents could see what they were being taught, and they were outraged at what they were seeing. So there's evidence that woke teachers are going on. So they would go to school board meetings and they weren't always treated politely. So I created a hotline so they could communicate with me, and they don't have to worry about that, and then we would investigate for them. The most interesting email we got on our hotline was not from a parent, but from a teacher who complained about a professional development program in the Mesa School District, where she showed us the video that showed them saying that the United States is a white supremacist country. That has no business in our public schools.
Brave teacher.
Brave teacher.
There are a lot of these brave teachers today out there at the press release that we just did, and I took the time to hug every single one of them because it is so significant, and I know what they're going through. I know what it's like to have the teachers unions hovering over you and the colleagues and all of that, and to be able to show up and just embrace us here has been amazing.
There are teachers who work for me now in the department who, when they were teaching in school, saw students whose needs were not being met. And they wanted to tell the parents, you need to move this child to a charter school. Their needs are not being met here. But they were afraid of retaliation from the administration. They're afraid of being blackballed by other teachers. Now people can communicate directly with me.
Yeah.
And we are providing choice. So parents, and we're advertising that, letting parents know if their child's needs are not being met. We have wonderful public schools, and that's great. And that's 90% of my efforts are directed toward helping the schools improve their academics. But if the child's needs are not being met, we have families with 3 children, 2 are doing fine in public school, one's needs just aren't being met, and so the parents do the scholarship for the one, and the 2 stay in public school. We're just making it available for people, so the goal is every child's needs should be met.
I think it's amazing that you make it available to communicate with you directly, and people can. I know that you have a Twitter handle, which we're gonna attach to this video. Mm-hmm. I just think it's so incredible that people can just reach out to you directly and basically tell you what their needs are, right?
Yes.
You're listening to the community's needs. One of the things I learned from teachers recently, which I think is just mind-boggling, is this idea that there's a baseline of 50% for grading, which basically means that if a kid turns in an absolute blank paper, they still get 50% on their grade.
So if it's a test and they get 30% right, 30%, they're at 80% and they get a B.
And
It's outrageous. It's totally outrageous. Yeah.
I mean, it's just the lowering of standards. So is there
That's
something you're able to
that's
do?
why I ran, because of the lowering of standards.
Yeah.
That's why I ran, and even though my friends told me I was crazy, because we have to raise standards. You know, China's number 1, and we're number 14. If we don't turn this around as a country, we're going to be a third world country, and China's going to be the superpower that calls the shots. Imagine a world like that. You know, you're a national program. Everybody has to put their shoulder to the wheel and get academics back into our schools and high standards back into our schools, so that you know, which is good for its own sake, but so that we can compete internationally.
Tom, how can PragerU serve Arizona? What are things that we can do to be supportive to parents, educators, people like you who are advocating for choice, for wholesome education, common sense for America?
Yeah, well, you have videos that teach objective history, so we are making it available. We don't choose curriculums. We're a local control state. The districts choose that, but we're making it available to parents. We're making it available to schools who want to use it, and we're trying to publicize, as we did today, the availability so that people can look at it, and if they like it, they can use it.
Love it. Well, we're here for you, and we're here for Arizona. Love being here. Thank you. Thanks for the work.
We love you having come.
you.
Thank you.